Hello, friends. Rules-based international order. You may have heard this phrase. It's a very interesting phrase. It's something that has made headlines, especially with the Canadian Prime Minister. And many other European leaders have touched on this too, that the rules-based international order is collapsing or being undermined, and a new order is starting to emerge. And what that will be is yet to be decided. But the erosion of one order normally leads to the creation of a newer order. And so, what is the rules-based international order, first of all? What is that? This thing that many leaders are talking about that's going to be eroded, that's being eroded, and the new one is going to emerge. So, what is the rules-based international order?
It seems that every day we're reminded that we live in an era of great power rivalry, that the rules-based order is fading, that the strong can do what they can and the weak must suffer what they must. And this aphorism of Thucydides is presented as inevitable, as the natural logic of international relations reasserting itself. And faced with this logic, there is a strong tendency for countries to go along to get along, to accommodate, to avoid trouble, to hope that compliance will buy safety. Well, it won't. Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Over the past 2 decades, a series of crises in finance, health, energy, and geopolitics have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration. But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion.
Well, 1945, right? Formation of the United Nations takes place. And you can go online and you can look this up. Basically, the rules-based international order is sort of things like the United Nations and the World Trade Organization and the International Monetary Fund and the International Criminal Court and the SWIFT international banking systems, and the World Health Organization. So you have all these different world organizations that largely dictate how the world is going to be set up, how people interact with each other. And then you have things like the United Nations Charter for Human Rights. You have human equality, you have free markets, you have democracy and international cooperation along those lines. So that is the rules-based international order. And what's characteristic of it is the UN, International Monetary Fund, World Trade Organization, all these transnational, international organizations and committees that help nations navigate the world, basically, how they interact with each other. That's the rules-based international order. And the Canadian Prime Minister and the Finnish leaders and the German Chancellor, all of them, even French, were adamant that this world order that emerged in 1945, that dominated the world, is sort of being undermined at the moment, and a new order is being set up.
I'm sorry, it's all bogus. We all know, everybody knows that this situation is going to come to a resolution. I think it's going to be a resolution that's good for Europe. Most importantly, it'll be a resolution that's good for the United States of America. But the idea that they haven't made any accommodations or concessions to the United States, it's not true.
Are we at the beginning of a new world order where we move away from Europe and toward anything else? Maybe even potentially Russia, if we can get past what's happened here? I mean, there's a real question about that, given some of the speeches you've made to
Sure.
the European Union, some of the speeches that President Trump has made,
Yeah.
what's happening culturally in Europe, what's
very
their
sad.
crackdowns on free speech. They just
so
look
sad.
less and less like we do.
Yeah.
And there's a real question about whether there's a massive shift happening now in terms of world alliances long term.
Well, there's definitely, I think, a new world order. I think the president has sought to it. There's a new world order in trade. There's a new world order in globalization and the way that we invest in our economy versus, foreign supply chains. There's a new world order, and that the president is willing to shake up some old alliance structures. I mean, NATO, I think, is much different because of the president's leadership than it was 10 years ago. It was sort of coasting. It was effectively a protectorate of the United States of America. Obviously, you saw what happened in Venezuela. So, yeah, the president is putting a stamp on world history, but fundamentally in an America First way. Like that is the orienting focus.
So how is this being undermined, right? What is happening? What is happening in the world today? Well, you have something very interesting happening in the United States of America, because even though these were international organizations and we lived in the rules-based order, and we still do basically live in a rules-based order, a lot of it went off of the drumbeat of the United States of America. The United Nations is in America, and NATO is largely funded by the United States, and world trade and monetary organizations, America has a lot of influence in them, So this, and then of course democracy, the spreading of democracy, that's something that's Western in its philosophy, let's just say. So America dominated this rules-based international order. In fact, they were the ones who really pushed in setting it up, And so the new order is not really the change of the rule-based order into a new order. It's really just the change of America's role in the world. So instead of maintaining this liberal world order, we got to abide by the United Nations. We have to abide by treaties and international organizations and human rights and that sort of thing. America has changed its disposition to one of what's called hard power projection. That means that America sits as a power in the world that can influence the world militarily, politically, and economically without having to go through various channels, let's just say, international channels, It as an individual nation, as opposed to a committee of nations, as opposed to an organization of sorts, will be the agent that causes the world to enact changes that hopefully are beneficial for this said power, the United States of America. So how does that work, right? How does that work? So you had Trump's Board of Peace, which many people were critical of because they said, wait a second, we have the United Nations, which is set up to maintain world peace. Why do we need a Board of Peace? And it's Trump's Board of Peace, and so I'll take you to this. So Trump designated the headquarters of the Board of Peace in Washington, D.C. So it says here that according to the Board of Peace's charter, the government of the United States serves as its official depository. In late January 2026, Trump designated the headquarters of the Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace in Washington, D.C. as the seat of the board. So this is a Board of Peace. It's situated in Washington, D.C. It's Trump's sort of institution that he set up, and says here that it's for promoting peacekeeping around the world. So the Board of Peace has been established, and guess who's the chairman for life? It is Donald Trump. And guess who has the authority on the Board of Peace? Who's the one who will be dictating things? It will obviously be the United States of America. So this is Trump's attempt to bypass the international rules-based order and just set up his own sort of thing, which is very interesting. This is something that's taking place, Trump's Board of Peace. You also have the Trump-class battleship, the largest battleships in the world. The Trump-class battleship was announced. You have the formation of the Golden Dome, which is a multi-layer missile defense system for the United States. That's why they're so adamant on having Greenland, because part of their Golden Dome missile defense strategy is situated around Greenland, you know. You have Trump's Triumphal Arch as well, which is this massive 250-foot tall arch that would be his Triumphal Arch. It would give, I guess, glory to the United States of America, just as old cultures used to build massive monuments to give glory to their empire. So Trump wants to build a Triumphal Arch. You have Trump's gold card as well. So essentially, if you're poor, you wait in line. If you're rich, you can spend $1 million and you can be on a path to citizenship through Trump's gold card. And then you have the old petrodollar, right? So why is the American currency the world's reserve currency, right? Why does it have so much international backing? Why is it the thing, you know? It's because of the petrodollar. So the petrodollar gained prominence in the 1970s following agreements between the US and oil producers like Saudi Arabia to price oil exclusively in dollars. So if you want to buy oil especially from Saudi Arabia, from various producers, you got to pay in American dollars. And so the petrodollars ensure that almost every nation needs to hold US dollars to purchase energy, maintaining constant global demand for the currency. So let's revisit, right? You had the Board of Peace established, America's international peacekeeping organization promoting world peace, and it would also be the ruling body that decides the fate of Gaza. You have the petrodollar, as I've mentioned, which keeps America's dollar as a reserve currency. You have the Trump-class battleships that are being produced, the largest battleships in the world. You have the Golden Dome missile defense system. You have the Triumphal Arch. You have Trump's gold card. And you have massive military projection around the world. You saw what happened in Venezuela recently. So you see the pushes against Iran. You see the pushes against Greenland. So this is a very active president, you know. And lastly, you have the religious dimension to it, which is very important here, because I'll read from the Times of Israel. And basically, Trump is being hailed as a Cyrus the Great. Now, Cyrus the Great in the Bible was called the Lord's anointed. He was the one who God was going to work through to do miraculous things. Cyrus the Great was a Messiah figure, basically. You know? And so, this is what they say. This is what is said here. It says, this is a news article here from the Times of Israel. It says here, Mr. President, this is a quote here. Mr. President, you stand before the people of Israel not only as another American president, but as a giant of Jewish history, one for whom we must look back 2.5 millennia into the midst of time to find a parallel. In Cyrus the Great, Amir Ohana, Speaker of the Knesset, told Trump on Monday as he welcomed the president for a victory speech to the Israeli parliament. So you have the Speaker of the Knesset saying that there is no one like Trump since the time of Cyrus the Great. You know, so they're proclaiming him as this sort of messianic figure. And it's a comparison that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also made, visiting the White House in 2018 during Trump's first term, shortly after the president moved the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Netanyahu situated Trump in a long line of friendly world leaders, including Cyrus, and then Lord Balfour and President Harry Truman. So they are linking him to to Cyrus the Great here. It says here, the Cyrus framing has also helped Christian Zionists embrace Trump since his first term, despite the community's initial misgivings about Trump's personal behavior and often crude demeanor. Yes. And it says here, as the return of the living hostages seemed imminent, Evans' group placed Cyrus the Great as alive billboards in Jerusalem. The billboards feature images of Trump and the American and Israeli flags intertwined. They also started printing commemorative coins as well of Trump and Cyrus. So, what do we have here? Right? We have the rule-based international order being challenged by a change in America's disposition, really. So basically, a new world order is being processed even as we speak, basically. And there's a fight to see who's going to be the dominant power in this new world order. America had a disposition of promoting internationalism, the rules-based system, UN, world trade, all these different things. But now it's changed its disposition to one of hard power projection. Trump's Board of Peace, the Trump-class battleship, the Golden Dome, the Triumphal Arch, the gold cards, and Trump being compared to Cyrus. So, and the Board of Peace, I mentioned that. So, what does this mean? You know? Like, Trump is in a very interesting position because he's a get things done kind of guy, and he's a man who takes the initiative, you know, and if the UN's slacking, he'll just do it himself. You know, if international organizations are too slow, he'll just move, you know, and that's what he's doing on the world scene. He's trying to position America in the most favorable position possible to be the world leader, you know. He's not going to do it by proxy. America's not going to be the leader of the world through the proxy of the UN, through the proxy of the World Health Organization, through the proxy of World Trade Organization. No, he's basically saying now, we're going to take the initiative here. We'll set up a Board of Peace. We'll set up Trump-class battleships, Golden Dome, everything. You know, he'll be hailed as a kind of Cyrus the Great figure too. And if you read in the Bible, you'll see here in Revelation 13 that, first of all, Revelation 13 verse 11 says, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth. He had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon." So, 2 horns like a lamb, that's Christian characteristics. But speaking as a dragon, that's persecuting power. That's the wrath of... speaking like a dragon, yeah, that's the wrath of the dragon. That's persecuting, that's something that is, you know, quite evil. And it says that there'll be miracles that this power will do. He'll cause people to dwell on the earth to worship the false system, whose deadly wound was healed. He does great wonders so that he make fire come down from heaven on earth in the sight of men. Deceives the world to set up an image to the beast. Verse 16, causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark, their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So, there'll be international control of the world's economy by this power. There'll be use of force. There'll be false miracles taking place. So, you already see the religious element in Trump already. You know, Christian nationalism, right? Comparing him to Cyrus the Great, right? Comparing him to this messianic figure that's going to emerge in the world. The Times of Israel does that. Christian Zionists do that. A lot of evangelicals do that. You know, so you have that religious element coming into play. You have the economic thing coming into play with tariffs and sanctions, you know, on countries that don't align with America's interests.
Any response to President Macron saying he will not join the Board of Peace? Oh, did he say that? Well, nobody wants him because he's going to be out of office very soon. So, that's all right. What I'll do is if they feel like Costo, I'll put a 200% tariff on his wines and champagnes, and he'll join. But he doesn't have to join. If he said that, you're probably giving it to me a little bit differently. But if he actually did say that, but as you know, he's going to be out of office in a few months.
And this reminds me of King Nebuchadnezzar, So a strong man emerged called Nebuchadnezzar, and he basically set up an image, and he demanded that people worship it, So he was a man who set up a false system, basically, a false system of worship, And so now you have, and he was part of the golden age, right? Because Babylon was like one of the pinnacles of civilization in that time, and the Bible says about this king that he was the head of gold. You are this head of gold, and he was part of a golden age, and he built this golden image, and he demanded that people worship it, and so you have this golden age of Trump. Trump talks about the golden age of America, You got the gold card, you got the Trump-class battleships, Triumphal Arch, Board of Peace, Golden Dome. So these are things that are coming into play. And of course, he is seen as a religious messiah to many people because of his defense of Israel, because of his moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Even by Jews, they consider him to be basically the greatest person for Israel since whoever, right? So this is the current landscape we're living in, I think that Trump how to put it? I mean, the new world order is being processed, basically. We are living in very interesting times, and the old rule-based order that was an American proxy for world influence is now being pushed aside, and America's coming to the forefront, by just openly projecting its power around the world. Even challenged NATO too, in many respects. With the whole Greenland thing, NATO even got challenged by the United States of America, So it's not scared to thump its muscles, and to project itself around the world. And, Iran, is facing significant military buildup now, so there is a power projection around the world by this power. And religious people, the religious connection is paramount. That he has a lot of religious influence, and in order to appease the Christians, in order to be seen as kind of to mark his place in history, he's going to have to really do something that's going to make the Christians absolutely happy. He already attacks Iran. That's making all the evangelicals go crazy when he attacks Iran, and supports Israel. But I think there's something more around the corner. You have Christian nationalism on the rise. I think that there's going to be a merger of many church and state institutions. I think that the religious organizations will influence the government so much. The Christian Zionists, the evangelicals, whatever you want to call them, so much, the Christian nationalists, so much that Trump is going to oblige and fulfill their demands. And essentially you'll have an erosion of church and state separation. And you will have the religious bodies of America and the political bodies working together to implement their decrees and dogmas in the name of stopping woke, or in the name of promoting a greater America, let's just say, So this is what's happening around the world. And Yeah, it's very interesting times. Very interesting times. A new world order is being processed even as we speak.